me.
Welcome to the Senior Rehab Podcast,
The podcast for rehab clinicians that want to better serve older adults.
And now, your host, Dustin Jones.
Hello, folks. Thanks for the download. Real quick, before we get into the article, I want to give you just some information on the podcast network that we have going that I announced, I think, a few months back now. So you all may be wondering, what's the relationship like between me and the Senior Rehab Project and these other podcasts? So what I have done is tried to create a group of people that have valuable information to say about how we care for older adults. These are people that I believe in personally, have a lot of value to bring to this conversation that we're all a part of, and how can we move the needle forward in geriatric care, geriatric rehab. So, right now we've got Christina Novak and Nick, her fiance Nick, with Stave Off. We have Mandy Chamberlain, occupational therapist with Seniors Flourish. We have the Home Health Minute, which is the podcast for the home health section of the American Physical Therapy Association. And all I'm doing is basically doing everything on the front end to get the ball rolling for these podcasts. And then these podcasters are doing their thing and producing really good content. And I'm there basically to help out if they need it. In exchange for that, they're a part of the network. And down the road, if there is a potential for sponsorship for different businesses or services that want to pay for spots on these podcasts that will actually serve the audience that they're intended for, then we'll share a bit of that revenue. So I want this to be a very thoughtful and calculated endeavor in terms of if we bring on ads and who that would be. So I will be, seeking advice from the patrons that have, given their money in order to have some feedback in the future of this podcast. So we haven't started those conversations yet, but they could potentially be coming down the road. So that's a relationship. I'm really excited about it because there's incentives for all of us to do good work and to serve you all, the listeners, but also to serve our patients, the older adults that we all work with on a day-to-day basis. So we have, 4 podcasts right now. We're going to add another one, the Voice of the Patient podcast. So this podcast was started in March of 2016 by David Reed. He's a physical therapist down in North Kakalaki. He's also a previous guest on the Senior Rehab podcast. He's done a really awesome job with that podcast and website over the past year, but he really has a passion for writing. He loves to do blog posts, which I think is the worst thing in the world. I'd rather talk in front of the microphone any day, but he likes to write. But he doesn't want the podcast to end. So he has sought out someone that shares his vision in how to basically form this conversation, and how can we improve healthcare, not just by hearing, but actually listening to the voice of the patient. And that person that he has sought out is Zach Stearns. He is a physical therapy student from the University of Florida. He's going to be graduating pretty soon, but he has a background in psychology and has just an awesome perspective on putting the patient first and actually looking to the patient as an asset in the patient's own care. How can we really tap into the voice of the patient to help improve how we care for people and improve outcomes? So they're coming on the team. I wanted to take this opportunity to have you listen to one of my favorite blog posts this year that Zach wrote. So with all that rambling, I apologize. Here is Zach Stearns reading his blog post, Should Physical Therapy Merely Be Physical?
What does physical therapy look like to you? To you, physical therapy might be about stretching and exercise. Maybe it's about cracking necks and backs. Maybe it's about lifting heavy and lifting correctly. Maybe it's even about ultrasound and TENS. Maybe it's about slapping on a hot pack first, slapping on kinesiology tape next, and slapping on an ice pack last. Maybe it's all of the above, as long as it's physical. To me, it's none of the above. Physical therapy is about improving the human condition. Our role as therapists is to engage in a partnership with people so that something about their movement or pain gets better. The exact technique we use to fulfill that role is open to debate, but there's something about physical therapy we can't debate. We treat people, whole people. We don't treat muscles, bones, or joints in isolation, ever. We meet someone who presents everything about their health, their struggles, their passions, their dreams, their history, and their hope that the future will be less painful or easier than the present. Does that really sound physical? As a profession, physical therapy shudders at the thought of managing psychological health. As many of my friends and fellow therapists have said, we aren't psychologists. Of course we're not. But if our goal is to optimize movement to improve the human experience, then we sign ourselves up for the task of addressing anything and everything that influences movement, so long as our methods are within our scope of practice. As I will discuss in later posts, the relationship between mental health and movement demands that physical therapy adapts to the psychological effects on pain and disability. My goal as a student physical therapist is to take part, however small, in moving the profession forward. I want physical therapy to adopt the biopsychosocial model so vigorously that future therapists wonder what the profession was like when it lived within a purely biomedical framework. My goal, though, is not to appear as if I know all the answers. As a student, I am not even an entry-level physical therapist. What I do have, though, is a background in psychology. My bachelor's degree is in psychology. I've had jobs at 2 psychiatric hospitals. I even spent 6 months in a PhD program for clinical psychology before deciding that the fit wasn't right. To me, physical therapy is one of the most valuable ways to address the health of the whole person. The more I've learned about physical therapy, the more thrilled I am to see that some therapists value a background in psychology. Others are less thrilled. After finding out that my degree is in psychology, one PT said, "Oh, you're one of those guys." Obviously, we have work to do as a profession. Our approach shouldn't be afraid to look a little less physical and a little more psychological. The obvious next question I hear from my peers, though, might be yours. What does psychological treatment even look like? I get it. I've asked that question too, and I've been finding some answers as I continue to learn and to embrace my role as a student physical therapist. I encourage you to stay tuned for a future post about a relatively new framework, psychologically informed physical therapy practice.
There you have it, folks. Zach Stearns, the host of the Voice of the Patient podcast. Go to seniorrehabproject.com and you'll see him and David's pretty face on the team page, and you'll also see a link to where you can listen to the podcasts. Be sure to check out some of the blog posts that are on that website. David Reed is doing some awesome work there, and Zach joining the team is just going to be awesome. They're going to knock it out of the park, and I'm very excited for them to be a part of the Senior Rehab Project. So thanks for listening. I'll talk to you soon. Hit me. Thank you for listening to the Senior Rehab Podcast. If you enjoyed this episode, you should hop on over to seniorrehabproject.com to find more helpful content. You can also find out how you can join the team and be a part of the private Facebook group, the monthly mastermind meetup, and have a say in the content and direction of this podcast. Once again, that's seniorrehabproject.com. I appreciate you, and I'll talk with you soon. But in the meantime, do not forget to stay funky.